right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I am going to let one more person in. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Thompson, and I am the Executive Director of NASW New Jersey, and we're really excited to have you all here with us for a conversation on caregivers. We have a group from Nami, New Jersey. We have Jennifer, Lynn, the Executive Director, Meredith Blount, and Juliet joining us for this important conversation. And I am going to sit back and let them lead the dialogue today, but just a few housekeeping items. If you have questions, I would love for you to chat them directly to me. That way I can keep track of them. But you can also dialogue with one another and the participants as well as the speakers in the Zoom chat as well. So we certainly encourage you to use that off to your right-hand side of your chat box and the videos. If you aren't on mute, we just ask that you please mute yourself so that you don't have a ton of background noise. But certainly if you have any point in time in the conversation, want to jump on and share something with us, we'd love to hear from you. So just raise your hand and we'll come online and we'll unmute you. I'm going to be on for the entire conversation, but I'll be in the background. So I'm going to turn my camera off while our presenters lead the conversation today. But again, so glad to see everyone joining us. Thank you to Nami, New Jersey for agreeing to lead this conversation. It's an incredibly important one, and I'm really excited that you are here with us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Meredith and crew, and welcome.
Great. Thank you so much. And we just really want to thank the New Jersey chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, because this is a wonderful opportunity to have this conversation, and we're really grateful for that. So I'll just go ahead. I'm just not, just want to share a couple of slides, because what we want to do is talk about NAMI and why we've been, why we're important to the larger conversation that we're having today, because when we talk about NAMI New Jersey, there's two things that we hear over and over again. The first one is NAMI saved my life. And the second one is, I wish I found you sooner. So this is like a perfect example of what we do. And we just wanted to go over some of those things. So our mission really is to provide education, support, advocacy, and public awareness. We were looking to improve the lives of individuals and families affected by a mental illness, and this is how we do it. We were founded in 1985. This is actually our 35th year, and we started with a group of family members kind of around a kitchen table saying, this is our loved ones, they're going through so much, how can we help them? How can we get involved? And that's where we started. It's loved ones working with individuals with lived experience and advocating for what they need, supporting each other, and really educating with the end goal of recovery and support. So where does NAMI stand in this system of care is really, if you look at the essential client services here that really support successful recovery, NAMI does all these. We have self-help groups, we have caregiver support, we do enrichment, development, and of course, advocacy. And so through education, these are some of our education programs. We're actually looking on bringing more. So Basics is an education course for families whose children under 18 have either been diagnosed with a mental illness or are exhibiting signs and symptoms. And this helps the families understand what they're going through. It's kind of an offshoot of our largest and most successful and most beloved program, which is Family to Family. Family to Family is an 8-week course, and this is key for anyone who's working with families or really wants to figure out how to support the family better. This is the way to go. This is the class. It works with families and it talks about mental illness. It teaches them about mental illness. We go into specific diagnoses and as well as the overall role of the family member. And the one thing that one of the goals of getting out of this program, which is one of the reasons I love it, is it talks about separating the individual from the mental illness and looking at it that mental illness is real. It is something that's happening. It's not something that to be ashamed of or to be scared to talk about. if someone, God forbid, had a heart attack and just fell on the floor in front of you, right? You wouldn't stand over them and say, get up, knock it off, get to work, go outside, go to school, whatever it is. It would be cruel. It would actually be cruel for you to do that. And so what Family to Family does is says, that's the same thing with someone living with a mental illness. You can't just yell at them and shake it off. You really need to look at it as something real. It's biological. It's affecting them. And so it's a great, great course. And this is really where families say, it absolutely saved my life. I didn't understand until this moment. Another great program that we have is Interim Voice. We can take it anywhere. Now in the Zoom world, we literally can go anywhere you want us to go. We can present for anybody. So Interim Voice is personal stories told by individuals in recovery, individuals who are living with mental illness. And they share their discovery, their diagnosis, challenges that they've had, and things that they do for themselves and how they advocate for themselves in their own recovery. It is such a powerful tool. And it's amazing because people are sharing their hearts in this program. And you can watch it over and over again, and it's different every time. And we can go anywhere. And this is one of the programs when we're in a room with people, when the presentation's over, people just start gravitating to the presenters because it has such a powerful impact. And our support groups. Again, these are free to family members and individuals living with a mental illness. And please, you can refer anyone to these. Connection is for those in recovery, those living with a mental illness. It's a peer support model where people can come and really just share coping strategies, give each other understanding and support. And the family support group, again, this is for families who are really either struggling or can help others who are struggling. It's giving tools and tricks, and I've been there. I know what you're going through. And there's something in both of these groups when you walk in a room and you just know that everyone there gets you. You can see people's shoulders come down. You can see people start to breathe or like sit back in their chair. Like they come in like this and then they leave kind of like this because they know they're understood. They know that they're in a safe place, and it's very hard to find, and we have them. So it's part of our gold mine here. And advocacy. We do advocacy on several levels. One is obviously on the state level where we find issues or challenges or gaps in the system or programs that family members need. And we go and we talk to legislators, we work with state departments, we advocate. We teach people how to tell their story to make an impact and how to get things done at the state and local levels to bring services to their family members and to the larger community. But also with advocacy, we work on individuals as well. How do you advocate for yourself? How do you advocate for your loved one? How do you say, this is not the doctor I want to see. This is where I want to go. This is what my family member wants and needs for them to feel supported. So this is advocacy on multiple levels that we do throughout our programming. And especially now with the conversations with racial trauma and justice and equality, we have 4 multicultural programs, and Nami, New Jersey is kind of a leader in the Nami community among this. We have the African American outreach, Chinese American outreach, South Asian American outreach, as well as Nami en Español. And these groups go and really work within different communities within a multicultural context. While everyone can talk about cultural competency, the term I'm hearing now, which I loved, was cultural humbleness. Is that not that I'm an expert in your culture, but that I acknowledge it and I realize that it has a place in what you're dealing with now. And so a lot of these programs really work with people to, again, come to a safe place, somewhere that you're understood. And this has been such a huge support for so many of our family members that in addition to the stigma of a mental illness within certain communities, there's even less ability to talk or to share. And then these really give people the avenue to do that. We have education programs for educators, for teachers, K through 12 in college. How do you as a teacher, as a paraprofessional, as someone in a school building, know when someone's having a mental health crisis or struggling with their current diagnosis? How do you engage them? How do you support them? And these 2 programs do that and give teachers and others within the building tools and opportunities to recognize and engage individuals. We have an Expressive Arts Network. this is great. This is poetry, arts. I'm not artistic, but people who are amazing. And it's a great opportunity for people to use their talents to express themselves. We just had our poetry contest, and we have our top 10 poems if you want to go to our website. It's just really amazing and raw and powerful when people can express themselves in different ways. So the real point, now that you know a lot about Nami, New Jersey, the real point is why, right? Why families, why caregivers? You know, I'm working with an individual who has a mental illness. Why do I have to, you know, talk to the family? Why do I care? You know, that's what they need to do. Nami's strength, and Nami was built on this idea of families and caregivers as part of that support system, the bubble wrap that goes around the entire process. And there's been numerous studies, and there's just a couple of points from a study that's just recently been released, is that there has been a significant association between family involvement and the creation of a plan and the continuation of the plan once they've been out, once they're in an outpatient setting. And involvement of a family, and family, you know, the definition is a broad definition. Involvement of the family on any level during an inpatient shows a positive effect. And that's really what it is. We are concerned and we want to help our loved ones manage and have hope for recovery. And so that's really where I'm going to leave off. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jen, and two of our amazing members who are also family members and caregivers, to talk about really what is the role of a family member? What is the role of a caregiver? It's not just people being nosy, wanting to know the information. Why is it important? And really kind of sharing some personal stories as to why this is so important and why we feel so strongly about it. So Jen, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Meredith, and thank you to Jennifer Thompson for having us on this webinar. We're really excited to partner with NASW New Jersey and share information about NAMI as well as the caregiver perspective. My name is Jennifer Hughes, and I'm the Associate Director of Program Quality Assurance at NAMI New Jersey. Today, we have invited two caregivers to share their personal experiences of having a loved one with mental illness. Lynn Malloy is the Director of Family Programs at NAMI New Jersey, as well as a family support group facilitator. And Juliet Hyman is a member of NAMI Warren County and a NAMI Smarts for Advocacy teacher. Family members and caregivers often play a large role in helping and supporting the millions of people in the U.S. who experience a mental health condition. When someone has a mental health condition, support from family can make a really big difference. However, it may be hard for family members to know what approach is best. It's very hard sometimes to balance showing support for yourself and your loved one and caring for yourself, as well as encouraging others to be responsible for their own actions. So throughout this panel, Lynn and Juliet will share their stories and experiences with the mental health system. I would like to start off by introducing Lynn and having her share her story with us.
Thanks, Jen. My name is Lynn Malloy, and although I work with NAMI New Jersey, I'm also a licensed social worker, but today I'm here as a family member of a loved one with serious mental illness. My loved one is diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder as well as bipolar disorder. Just to tell you my story and about my loved one that was diagnosed, my child drastically changed at age 11. They went from being an active, straight-A student, participant in the theater, an athlete, to a terrified child who refused to go to school and would devolve into inexplicable rages at home. They began isolating, self-harming, sleeping excessively, and became suicidal. They were a completely different person. We thought maybe there were issues surrounding their adoption, so we sought out a therapist. And school became a monumental struggle. We also reached out to the school for assistance, or basically anyone who would listen. Eventually, the therapist suggested a psychiatrist. This began our journey into the world of serious mental illness. Like many with mental illness, my child's diagnosis evolved as well as their treatment plan. We were lucky to have a good psychiatrist and eventually settled on the fact that she had bipolar illness with generalized anxiety disorder. Despite the diagnosis, the school refused any special accommodations or classifications for her illness because, as they said, my child was too smart. Imagine having a serious medical accommodation for, say, epilepsy or diabetes not given to you because your child was too smart. Also, like many people, our social circle revolved around our peers with children of the same ages. I couldn't share any of what was going on with them. And as their illness and behaviors worsened, many of my friendships fell apart. It was a terrible and isolating time. There were medication changes, intensive therapy, hospitalization that included days spent in the emergency room due to a lack of pediatric beds, all while dealing with a public school system. It became almost too much to bear. Despite the fact my husband and I are both educated and have financial resources, our home life was in chaos and we were falling apart as a family. I felt like I was losing my child. The illness took over our lives and we didn't know where to turn. I'm going to turn to Juliet, or should I keep going?
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing that your powerful story. Now I would like Juliet to share her story and her personal experience.
Thank you. And Lynn, what Lynn shared is very similar to myself and my family's experience. The difference is we homeschooled our children from beginning to the beginning of high school. And my loved one is our son, one of our sons, and he has a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. With my son, he had a typical strong-willed personality. And so, you know, it's always been challenging. He's very, very intelligent, very artistically gifted, high achiever, and similarly to Lynn's son, or loved one, he was very active in high school when he matriculated to high school. But that's when some issues started to occur that we noticed. And like Lynn, we had no one to talk to. We were very involved in our church community, but we didn't get the support from our church community because there's so much stigma attached with that kind of behavior. And it was very difficult to share honestly without bringing stigma upon my loved one. And so we continued. The diagnosis was in 2001. Prior to that, there were a lot of behavioral and mood issues which we didn't understand, which we thought maybe it was drugs, but it wasn't. There was a lot of, again, sleeping, tiredness, and not following through with normal commitments that he understood, you know, in our home. So he went on to college, and it was there after this sophomore year, he withdrew. And the mitigating circumstances were never clear to us because we knew something was wrong, but he could not speak to us. He would not talk to us. He would not share. He just was numb. That's the best way to describe it. So of course, my husband and I did the best thing we could, and that was just, okay, you're not in school, well, get a job. You know, this is what you're gonna do. And that is the worst thing that we could have done for our loved one because we had no idea the pain that he was encountering and going through on a daily basis. It wasn't until 2013, mind you, his diagnosis was in 2001 after, again, police were involved when he had a mental illness crisis. And from there, he was in and out in the system. 2013, due to a very botched up mental illness crisis call, he was arrested at our home. And it was then that I learned about Nami, New Jersey, because the assistant prosecutor's office was in dialogue with us because on the report, we were listed as the victims. So there was some communication between the prosecutor's office and myself. And that's when she alerted us to Nami. And that's where our life turned and gave us hope. But prior to his diagnosis, I would characterize it as our life went from bad to worse. Trying to navigate the mental illness system and mental health system it's beyond crazy. And so I'm so thankful for Nami.
Thank you so much, Juliet, for sharing your story with everyone. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a couple different questions so that Lynn and Juliet can speak a little bit more about the importance of the caregiver and family role within the mental health system. So Lynn, I'd like to ask you, describe what it was like for you and your family when your loved one was first diagnosed. What were some of the challenges?
Well, you know, as I said, as I admitted, we were really struggling. Besides the isolation, there was just, the multiple diagnoses, because especially when you're involved with young people, which many times we know the diagnoses happen to younger people, there's also hormones going on. There's high school, there's all that, just normal changes. So it was really challenging in terms of, is this just normal teen behavior? Oh, wait, it's just anxiety, it's depression. So there was that going on. It was a constant re-education. And again, I think we, like Juliet said, faced a lot of stigma. There was a lot of, judgment of our parenting and, pull some tough love. Oh, you have to be stricter, and just not that recognition of what was really going on. And also many times when people have a mental illness, that they act out when they're safe. So we were first to see a lot of the behaviors at home. They were mild, but then it started spilling out into other areas such as the school. Like Juliet, some of the other challenges we found when things got so bad, dealing with trying to find help, and you call crisis and you receive a police response as opposed to a medical response, with the police coming into your house, threatening your loved one who's just ill. Now, you have to realize my loved one was, 11 years old at the time, yet we were having an excessive police response. So that was just really challenging. And where do you turn? Who do you talk to about that? And like Juliet, we found Nami, I think, was what was really starting to help turn our life around and find the resources. And there are resources out there, but they're challenging. And it's really on the caregiver to piece together all of these resources in a complicated system, all while your loved one's diagnosis keeps changing and you're dealing with treatment professionals, and something that not many people go through. So you really don't have people to talk to about that. I think that was really, again, that thank God we found Nami, because it really started to give us some of the tools that we needed. It gave us the skills to deal with the professionals in the mental health system, as well as how to work with the school. I was able to find people on how to gain those accommodations that we needed. And it was the first place we could openly discuss our struggles and realize we weren't alone. It was the first time I could talk to somebody and not feel judged or have ignorant comments made about our parenting.
Thank you, Lynn. It sounds like, working with a large treatment team can sometimes be challenging for a family member and caregiver, as well as trying to support your loved one during that time. What resources you've explained, how Nami was a key resource for you as the caregiver and family member while your loved one was receiving treatment, even initially. So
absolutely. And it gives you you as a family member need the skills to deal with this that you don't know, you couldn't possibly know. And by gaining those skills and the education, it gave us the empathy towards our loved one. And it really kind of improved our interactions. It improved the lives of our family because we knew how to deal with, and like we said, like Meredith said, we started to be able to separate our loved one from the illness. I mentioned earlier, I felt like I was losing my child, but our child came back when we were able to do that and get the proper treatment.
Yeah, thank you. And it's important to, I know in one of our family to family classes, and it's spoken about a lot, is the idea of grieving your loved one prior to their diagnosis or prior to that. So
right.
that's a concept that is spoken about a lot. Juliet, I want to ask you a little bit as well. What are some of the challenges that you faced when your loved one was first diagnosed?
Yes, thank you, Jen. Very similar to Lynn's. However, when my loved one was diagnosed, the particular challenge was that he was an adult. And so the HIPAA laws, which exist, are on the books, was a severe detriment to our ability to help, because at that point, no one would talk to us unless we had permission from our child. And when a person is going through a traumatic experience like a major mental illness, obviously their moods are not up to par. Emotionally, they're confused. There's so much going on. And one reaction, because of the difficulty of handling the event leading up to that major crisis of hospitalization, it's really chaotic and can be very hurtful, not only to the parent-child relation, but to the whole family as well. And so we were at a loss in terms of how to help our son and how to advocate for him because of that wall that HIPAA presents. And that was really, really the hardest thing and we've learned a lot of skills and tools through the years, which we can share later, but that was the biggest thing. Just taking, you raise a child and you're intimately involved and proactively involved in their care. And then here they are, especially, and a lot of people get their first onset of a major mental illness in those critical years of adolescence and in college. And that's the time when the law says that you're severed from having any influence in what dictates their medical treatment. And that's frightening. That was frightening. So.
And can I just add on to what Juliet said? I feel it was a blessing and the curse that my loved one was impacted so early. The blessing being that I had a lot of control over the therapy process and the providers. But they recently turned 18 and I see the shift already and the struggle is real. I have a mentally ill 18-year-old who is, being treated as an adult in this complicated system of care. But Nami's given me a lot of tools that we are proactively putting a lot of protections in place that I never knew would exist. So I'm thankful for that, but it's a real challenge, like Juliet said.
And one more thing that I want to stress is that this is a human experience. And so when a person has a diagnosis, it affects the entire family in ways that, it's just indescribable. Meredith had mentioned in the comparison that other illnesses do not have those kinds of ramifications. And so, we had other children at the same, we're trying to parent as my one child was going through this horrendous experience. And we had no skills, no information whatsoever. And so you can imagine I have 3 other children in addition to our one, and it's only the grace of God that I'm here. And Nami.
It sucks the life out of your family, the illness does, and all the attention goes there, and it impacts the siblings so much. Absolutely. And as well as caregivers.
We're still dealing with the healing process with our other family members.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it sounds like even when your loved one is on a journey to recovery, there are ups and downs that they go through. And Juliet, I know you spoke about the HIPAA law a little bit, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more, since there may be some providers on this, having this conversation with us. What are some recommendations for, I guess, a provider to involve the family more, even though we know and understand the importance of HIPAA, but to work with the family? Why is that so important during treatment?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I want to preface to say that I appreciate all the clinicians and social workers that are part of a person's team to help them recover. One of the things I recognize is that this area of mental health and mental illness in particular is so underfunded. But yet the implications, the wide range implications and impact for the general society and the cost factor, you know, that the lives that potentially had so much potential to contribute to society, because of because of mental illness, it detracts from the culture, and yet, you know, we're not given the funding to, you know, rectify this. And so one of the things that we learned through the years was, even though the patient may be belligerent at the time and will refuse to have their team consult family or have the family at work, a social worker or whoever would benefit from as much information as possible. And so what we learned is that we'd make contact, we'd introduce ourselves, and we would say, we understand about HIPAA, but here is what's going on. And we would just share, we would email these stories and accounts about what led up to his hospitalization, whatever, so that his clinicians can have as much information as possible, because ultimately they need that in order to determine what kind of treatment to give that person. It took almost a decade to figure out the kinds of medications that our loved one, you know, needed. And so it's a long, difficult process. And the more information that the health field can have, the better. And like it or not, it comes from family, because we live with them. We know. And yes, there are a few families that are so dysfunctional that they have no clue. But that's, from my experience, that is not the norm. And I think the health field and the social services should take that default position. In spite of HIPAA, they should. I had one social worker who was very sensitive, and she apologized and said, I cannot disclose any information, but please feel free to share with me anything that you think we need to know. And I had a couple of social workers who presented themselves that way, and that was tremendous comfort and assistance.
Thank you, Juliet, for identifying some, you know, how to be, you know, an experience that you had with the social worker that was positive, even though HIPAA, you know, is something that has to be put into place. So thank you. I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Nami a little more. Lynn, can you speak a little bit about how Nami did help you? How did you find Nami? How can provide, like, what is the benefits for providers to refer families to Nami?
Well, sure. You know, and we were in all different systems of care and dealing with a bunch of different professionals. No one ever mentioned Nami to me. I was at a family picnic and telling a relative I hadn't seen in a while about my struggle. I know her son is ill, and she mentioned Nami. And she said, you know, they really helped us. Why don't you give them a call? And I lived in a different county, but lo and behold, you know, there's a Nami in every county. And I reached out to them. And, you know, I was able to go to a support group and here, like I mentioned, you know, I wasn't alone. I did take the family to family class. And, you know, my loved one was young, so we couldn't both go, but I made my husband go to the next session of it. And it really gave us that, you know, that language and that skills, and it helped us to understand and to work with providers. You know, social workers, you're so busy. The psychiatrists are so busy. You don't have the time to educate the families also. And the families need that education. They need to understand their loved one's diagnosis. They need to learn how to work with them and be a part of a team. Really, I always say the treatment is that of a team that includes the professionals as well as the family. So, you know, I really encourage you to refer families to them, because then it puts them in the playing field. And like I said, our relationship improved. And my daughters, it just improved the outcome of it, because we were able to work together. We were able to approach the illness differently, all as a team, and not be so uninformed, I guess, is it. And, you know, as Meredith mentioned in the studies, all the evidence is there that outcomes are better when family members are involved. And also, you know, when a loved one is in a crisis and they're symptomatic, they're not thinking straight. So you need the family to know what is going on with their illness. They're the first line of defense. They're the caregivers. They're the ones that need to alert the team sometimes when something's wrong. So, you know, again, Nami gave me the tools and the understanding. They also allowed us to put, when things were better, not to just, although we need to do some self-care and take care of ourselves, that's time to be proactive. And we were able to put in an advanced psychiatric directive. We were able to get power of attorneys and set up a really good crisis safety plan, so that the next time things started to get bad, which happens in a serious mental illness, we know we're going to have those times, it wasn't this, oh my God, crisis, and things went absolutely chaotic. We were able to manage crises at home and not end up with hospitalizations, and work together. And again, I could not have done that without all of the education and support from family members who have walked this journey, and from all the education sessions we had about those tools that are out there I mentioned. So I really think it just behooves everybody involved. And it's, again, as I mentioned, improved our family relationships. We know how to communicate much better. And that's what's really important.
Thanks, Lynn, for sharing that. Juliet, can you comment a little bit on
Yes,
with Nami?
ditto with what Lynn shared. I don't want to reiterate, because I know there's going to be some Q&A and I don't want to take that time, but one of the things I want to say is that Family to Family course helped us in this way. You know, when you're caught in this malaise of mental illness, and there's just so much that needs to be done at the same time, and you don't know where to go to bone up or learn or whatever. And so Family to Family, it was a program that provided that for me, because we could, first of all, the program and the curriculum itself is so well structured and flows so well and logically that so many aspects of what we are experiencing is touched upon and dealt with. One of the things that it was our experience is our loved one, mental illness creates such a fear that within themselves that they're paralyzed, they can't speak. And so, and not with the fear comes shame, and the shame is stigma. So that we were in this revolving door of, you know, just waiting till the shoe dropped. That's how it was until we found Nami. And so with Nami, we learned to have more empathy for what our loved one was going through, so that we would not trigger him, but we could be an asset and a blessing, and that we could facilitate, you know, his ability to deal with what he was going through. And that's, first of all, is just expressing himself.
And I just want to add one more comment. You know, as we're going through this pandemic, we haven't been able to offer the Family to Family, but all the stress and anxiety that everyone is feeling, our loved ones are feeling, you know, multiplied. And Nami's been able to be online and be there to support people through this. And, you know, I'm so proud that we're able to offer support to both family and people living with mental illness. And again, please refer people to these groups 3 times a week for each of them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Lynn. And Julia and Lynn, I want to thank you for also, you know, you spoke about your loved one when they were first diagnosed, and then the education that you received. And now both of you, it sounds like you advocate for your loved one. You have plans. You know, you're very resilient throughout this whole journey that you've had with your loved one. So, you know, I want to highlight that, your resilience, and you know, everything that you've done for your family and for sharing your story with everyone on this conversation. And I do want to highlight as well that if families don't want to be involved, if with providers sometimes, still, you know, recommend Nami. It's, you know, it's a tool that can provide that education. If a family doesn't want to be involved in treatment, maybe if they will attend a support group, they can hear from others. And that's what I love to say is the benefits of Nami. It's peer-led. It's individuals, it's families with lived experience who share their story and try to help others and provide that empathy. So right now we have about 15 minutes left. Jennifer, if there's any questions, if anyone wants to come on and ask any questions to any of us, please feel free. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just piggybacking off of one of the things you just spoke about, we have questions, and we get this very often from individuals seeking mental health support or just resources like Nami offers. If you're not quite ready to connect, like, where are good starting places? Are there online resources that can get people familiar with what they might experience in a group? Sometimes baby steps are where people are ready to start at. Could you talk a little bit more about what that might look like and what resources are available on demand?
Absolutely. So I actually, what Lynn was mentioning, and I'm going to have Lynn talk about family support group in a little more detail, but I do have to say, with the pandemic, we have seen, because of the online support groups, we have seen more individuals and families attend because you don't have that pressure of, you know, showing your video or necessarily even speaking. You can really, you know, kind of observe and see what it's like. And have that different experience from in-person to online. Lynn, can you speak a little bit more about maybe family support group? And
Sure. So, you know, it's interesting. We get people who come on who are just at the beginning stages. They might not even, their loved one might not have a diagnosis. It's such a great time to try any of these things because it doesn't take the courage that it takes to walk into a room. And we've had people who've come on and just, maybe it's not for them. They just drop off, and we're okay with that. We always tell people, you know, we encourage the video participation because it's a more meaningful connection. But if they don't want to participate by video, that's okay too. So it's a really good time to sample that. When people come on, we also refer them if they're just looking for education. We are offering so many webinars that we have up on our website. They can just view at their leisure. We have them recorded. We have the Basics on Demand program for mental illness education if you have a loved one that's under the age of 18. So there are some programs that they can do. But again, we encourage them, come on and see what we're about. It's a very non-threatening environment. So I would tell them to give it a try. It's peer-led. We have a model. And again, you never have to share if you're not ready.
Great, thank you. It's so important that people are able to sort of start where they're at and take baby steps. And I know not everyone feels comfortable joining. Do people need to join via video, or can they just listen in?
Again, we encourage them to use the video just to have, you know, it's more meaningful to see people's faces, but we let them go by phone too and just listen in. That's fine. We do require them to register as all just for safety reasons. But
sure. I know one of the other questions that we've had a lot of prior to the conversation that we were hoping that you might be able to touch on a little bit, just because of the relevance right now, is the work that maybe educational resources for individuals who have mental illness and law enforcement, their interactions between the two. I know caregivers are certainly concerned and there seems to be a heightened awareness about this. Are there resources for parents and caregivers and individuals, and what might that look like?
So one program that Nami, as a national organization, had a hand in creating and then implementing around the country is a program called Crisis Intervention Training. So this is a 40-hour full week training for police officers in how to realize what you're dealing with is actually a mental health situation versus a criminal act, as well as, even if it is a criminal act, if there is a mental health component, how to de-escalate, how to engage, how to not kind of go into the home of a 12-year-old child and threaten arrest. So it's a program throughout the state. One thing, and I'll let Juliet and Lynn and Jen talk more on this as well, but one thing that's key for people to know is that if you do have a loved one in your home who's living with a mental illness and you think this is a possibility, is to know that when you call for police intervention, because it might happen, is to stay on the line. I'm looking for a CIT trained officer. Hopefully they'll have it. My hope is that the more we ask, the more people will get trained. But there are police officers who have gone through this training who are skilled and trained on how to de-escalate. Juliet, do you want to take a few on that?
Yes, we've had numerous experiences where we'd had to call crisis intervention where it required law enforcement. In my county, a crisis team assessment team will not come without an accompanied, police officer, law enforcement, or peace officer. And so the situation where it ended up in an arrest was really due to communication breakdown between the 911 operator and then the state trooper operator. And even though numerous times when I called the crisis number, I identified it as a mental illness crisis situation, it wasn't transmitted to the state police who services my community. So they came with already the perspective that this was a domestic abuse or domestic violence call. And so they handled it that way, and it went bad. Fortunately, my loved one was not injured, but it was, it was not good. It was not good, and it resulted in a month being incarcerated because we couldn't bail him out even if we had the means, because they would have just released him into the streets, because in the report we were listed as the victims, so they would not have allowed us to have him come back to our home, and that's where he was living at the time. So things are getting better, but we need more, again, funding and advocacy for release of funding so that law enforcement / peace officers are trained adequately to respond. And also we need advocacy in the criminal justice system, because the prosecutor has discretion in terms of how they can handle that particular type of arrest. And I would like to see a lot more favor towards, sentencing or whatnot due to the illness, rather than treating it as a criminal act and saying once they're booked, that's it. The system, and that doesn't help their mental health, let me tell you. So we've had many challenges, and my loved one is praise God, I'm very proud of him.
Thank you for sharing. We have another question, sort of a similar theme, but from Facebook. Just curious what, for social workers, can they be doing to be advocates within the systems? What are some of the things that they can partner with Nami on, and everyone is, social workers are great advocates, so they'd like to know what they can do to help with their legislation or their changes that they should be looking for their local police departments. How can people be more effective?
I'll comment on this. I do have a background in social work. I am a licensed clinical social worker. And coming to Nami, as an advocate, and something that I can, recommend to social workers is to, attend some of our meetings or become involved and just ask how they can help. You know what I mean? Do they want to advocate? Do they want to learn about, we have a public policy committee, for example. So, how can you be active on that? What are your interests? So if it is law enforcement and more training for CIT officers, how can you be involved more in state meetings or local meetings to promote that, to support that? Definitely any involvement in NAMI. We have volunteers that always are welcome to work with us, so that in any way.
Yes, and also joining the local affiliate. A member of your local affiliate would be a tremendous boost, because you would provide some insight and help the advocacy move forward, so that we could really change and achieve parity when it comes to the mentally ill.
I could give some good examples that in our experience, if a social worker could advocate on a systems level, my loved one's treatment team, the private therapist would contact the outpatient facility when they were hospitalized. A case manager came to the school, and as a social worker myself, I'm always a big advocate. You should get paid for your time, and I've offered to pay for that time. It's just so powerful when a treatment professional is sitting there as opposed to a family member. I'm a mom, and when I was dealing with the school, here comes the hysterical mom. But when the licensed clinical social worker came in and said, this person has this illness, you need to take this seriously, you get a completely different response. And use that power, use your credentials to help on a systems level. It can really facilitate treatment.
Okay. And I'll also add on, in addition to that, if you're working with families or individuals and you're coming up with roadblocks, I would say, definitely as a NAMI member, join NAMI, let family members know, say, this isn't a referral I can make for X reason, or this program is full. Let us know that kind of information, because as family members who are advocating, we do have power, because we're constituents, we're voters, we're advocating, we're going to different things. So if we're armed with the knowledge of what a social worker is dealing with, challenges to the overall system, if we know that and we can help affect change on that level as well, I think that would be a really great partnership for us.
Great, thank you so much. I think those are really great takeaways and some action steps for social workers. And Lynn, I have to agree with you. Social workers should absolutely be paid for wherever they are. So kudos to you for offering to do that.
We undervalue ourselves.
So often we do. And I think social workers really do have a role to play in these conversations and can be really effective advocates for families. You're right, when you are approaching it from a parent or a caregiver perspective, sometimes that voice gets confused or diluted a little bit, even though you may also have the criteria and the credentials behind your name. So having that backup support is really important for families. So we're wrapping up our hour. We just have another 2 minutes left by my clock. I just wanted to know if there are any final thoughts that you had for our community about how they can get involved, resources that you wanted to share, or any last bits of information before we close out today's conversation.
Yeah, I just want to, again, thank you so much, Jennifer, and your whole team for giving us this opportunity to have the conversation. We really appreciate it. We would definitely recommend everyone go to our website, which is naminj.org. We have a ton of information there. You can find our 19 affiliates that cover all 21 counties in the state, their local contact information, as well as what we're doing now during this COVID time. We have, like Lynn mentioned earlier, we have online support groups, we have webinars, we have classes. There's lots of different ways to get involved and get connected. But I also welcome anyone reaching out to us. If you have ideas for workshops, if you are seeing something that you're not really sure, if you want us to come to present to a local group or a local organization, whether it's an interim voice presentation or a general NAMI presentation, we have an amazing group of volunteers across the state, and we would love to work with anyone, any way you want us to.
Great, thank you so much. And I know there are a couple of people watching on Facebook who are looking for some of those resources, so we'll make sure that we post links to your website and that information online as well. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to Lynn and Juliet for sharing your personal experiences. That often makes it much more tangible and real for everyone, and it's a great way for us to understand what families are going through. So I really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a wonderful day and a great holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.